Unit 17, Part 2. So we're motivating the introduction of relational predicate logic by looking at an argument where the resources of the logic which we just finished, monadic predicate logic, one-place predicate logic, excuse me, are insufficient for grasping formally the validity of the argument, right? So using the resources of monadic predicate logic where all we have are one-place predicates, right? So the big shift we're going to make is from one-place to two- and three-place predicates, right? So where everything is capital letter, a capital letter like A, right? It's just one place. We're only allowed predicates where there's one place there. So forget that. Have, capital letter and one place. What are we going to do in relational predicate logic? We're going to introduce two and occasionally three places. Okay? It's monadic, many-place predicate logic. So we're going from one-place predicates to one-place predicates to two- and three-place predicates. Limited to the resources of just one-place predicates. That was what we went through in part one. We went through this attempt to symbolize this argument, and we could see its inadequacy. Its inadequacy, right? We didn't have enough structure of the actual argument, you might say, to be able to formally grasp the argument. No, we're not going to be able to do a proof to get from these premises to this conclusion. Not going to be able to get from the premises as expressed thusly in monadic predicate logic to the conclusion as expressed thusly in monadic predicate logic, right? We need to grasp more of the actual structure of the argument, because what's going on in our understanding when we do grasp the validity of the argument, right? Obviously, we're understanding what's going on in the actual thing with, as it were, more implicit logical resources than we've availed ourselves of in monadic predicate logic. Okay? So logic is very much often a matter of deciding how closely to match the structure of real English in your symbols, right? So you might want to match it less to simplify your formal system, but there's always this question of how much your symbolization, your translations, right, your formal presentations, by formal I mean in the symbols, there's always a question of how much your formal presentation captures of the structure of the actual English sentences and the arguments made from those sentences, and how much it leaves out. So you remember back to sentential logic when we were discussing a word like but, right, and how did we treat that? The word but, we said, we treat that as if it's just completely equivalent to the word and, because its basic logical meaning is equivalent to and, right? In that, especially when we're thinking of just simple sentential truth functional logic, right? Where when I say this but that, I'm saying this is true and also this other thing is true. I'm telling you that both of these things is true, which is what I'm saying when I'm saying and. When is P and Q true? Only when both P and Q are true. But obviously we have a word for but, we have a different word and. The words are not the same and their meaning is not exactly the same. We do lose something of the meaning of the English word but, treating it as completely equivalent to and. For a more elaborate example of this, you could look back to the discussion about the hook, right? Which we treated the English if-then as the material conditional defined by the truth table of our hook, and as the discussion there indicated, and if you remember the lecture, I critiqued Klenk discussion of why we should treat if-then as the material conditional. There was clearly a lot of the meaning of the English if-then that was missed in the material conditional. And there is actually a lot of professional philosophy about conditionals and how to treat them logically, and it's no walk in the park. Anyway, what's going to happen now as we transition from, I say that in way of anticipation of what I'm about to say about the transition from monadic predicate logic to relational predicate logic. We are going to capture more of the actual structure of the English sentences, okay? So okay. Remember when I was talking about quantifier sentences, when we started quantifier logic, and I was saying that consider the quantifier statement, no one loves me, okay? If I say to you, no one loves me, and you say, well, I'm so happy for you that you have the person named no one that loves you, right? Good for you. Hope that person called no one treats you well. Right? What happens? Ha 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 ha, we all laugh. Why is it funny? Because we actually comprehend the sentence, no one loves you, as logically misrepresented when you take it as if it is a singular sentence where no one is a name for an individual. That's not what the sentence, no one loves me, is doing. No one loves me is a quantifier sentence, and it is saying, we have the correct logical analysis, We have the right analysis of the meaning of the English if we represent it as we could only with quantifier logic. It is not the case that there exists an X such that X loves me, right? LX. Okay? Where loves there, we were treating as a one-place predicate. LX is X loves me, okay? But so that's going to be the inadequate part. Treating loves as a one-place predicate is what we're going to move away from. In fact, loves is going to be our paradigmatic relational predicate. More on that later. But when we were doing quantifier logic, right, kill it on camera. When we introduced quantifiers, we could at least grasp the difference between treating no one as a name and recognizing no one in no one loves me as the negation of the existential quantifier, right? So, any quantifier sentence, right? Every Australian is a surfer, right? Some of these are that. Quantifier statements had a different English quantifier statements, right? With English words that express quantity, that tell you of how many things a propositional function is true. Those quantifier words are a different linguistic being to names, right? So in English, there is this fact about English that there's this difference between names and quantifiers, just in English. So we had to grasp that. We had to accommodate that structure in order to grasp the validity of arguments like the ones we started with. Right? Klenk's one about the rhododendron leaves being poisonous, look back to the beginning of Unit 10, or my similar one about all Australians are surfers, Dan is a surfer, therefore Dan is Australian. Okay, so that's that sort of ontological frame, or this being attentive to the differences in linguistic being, for want of a better term, are what you have to attend to really grasp the motivation for moving now to relational predicate logic. Let me read, to highlight the bit I want, from 314 of Klenk, so the second page of Klenk's Unit 17. So she introduces this logic, she gives you this predicate logic, failure of a symbolization, right? It fails to grasp the validity of the logic. Okay, so, right, so notice, so bottom of 313, notice that with this symbolization, which is the best we can do in one variable predicate logic, there's no way to derive the conclusion from the premises. The argument is valid, however, we notice that, and the question is how to show it's valid. Well, we do have the universal connection between puppies and dogs in premise 2. Puppies are dogs. The conclusion that says that some people like no puppies And what we need to do is symbolize the liking predicate in such a way that we can then make the connection between not liking dogs and not liking puppies. This was not liking puppies, right? LX was not liking dogs. LX was liking dogs, so that's not liking dogs. KX was liking puppies, so that's not liking puppies. X doesn't like puppies, right? We didn't have any connection between, no connection between these predicates. We're going to do one with what we're going to make a connection available with this new symbolization for liking. And this is now the bit I wanted to highlight, talking about linguistic being in the next paragraph. So what we need to do is symbolize the liking predicate in such a way that we can then make the connection between not liking dogs and not liking puppies, given the link between puppies and dogs. We will affect this connection by introducing relational predicates. Predicates that state a relation between two or more individuals instead of just stating a property of one individual. The liking predicate, for instance, is clearly not just a one-place predicate. We don't just say that one thing likes, but rather that one thing likes another. Once we have such relational predicates available, it will be a simple matter to construct a proof for the argument above. And the proof, well, the premises and conclusion will be symbolized as thus on page 342, and a proof will be easy. But it's this statement about the being, right? So that sentence that says is. The liking predicate, for instance, is clearly not just a one-place predicate, okay? So it's about the nature of liking. Liking is, in English, a two-place predicate, and there are many such two-place predicates. Knowing, right, is not a one-place predicate. It isn't properly predicated just of an individual. It's, right, X knows Y, or A knows B, right? It's a relation between a knower and a known, right? Okay, so this focus on ontology, I want to point you to a few pages later in this text where it's important. So jump forward to 327, right? So this chapter does get quite heavy later on, especially 327, 329, in the analysis of the English sentences. 327, she introduces you to categorical relational statements. It's the beginning of section 4, but so just wanted to read this sentence from the second paragraph, 327. In general, in symbolizing relational predicates, you should have a different one-place variable for each class of objects mentioned, and a relational predicate for every relationship, right? So at what level? For every relationship, for every actual, so you have to be looking at the English and recognizing which predicates are in fact, right, ontologically as it were, that which predicates are in fact relations. Those ones should get relational predicates. And this is the frame that you have to really understand the very heavy stuff on 329, bottom of 328 and throughout 329, she begins talking about the bottom 328. Many different kinds of phrases can be symbolized by using relational functions plus quantifiers, like transitive verbs, for example, and then comparatives, genitives, and possessive she goes through on 329. We'll come to a bit of this later, but you've got to understand that, right? You're looking at the English and you've got to be asking yourself what it is. What kind of predicate is it? Is it a one-place or a two-place? Okay.